Welcome back everyone. Today we're diving in how to break out of gold rank and finally hit platinum. If you haven't checked out my previous two videos, I would highly recommend watching them first since some of the information here builds on those concepts. Let's jump straight in with tip number one, and that is the importance of flexing roles. Now, if you're serious about climbing past gold, you need to be flexible with your role queue. Sticking to just one role can make progression much harder, and while it is possible, it will be an uphill battle. Being able to switch between tank and healer gives you an edge. Playing tank helps you understand positioning, how fights unfold, and how to control space. Playing healer, on the other hand, gives you a better sense of sightlines and where your team needs to be to stay safe. When you switch to DPS or tank after playing and understanding healer, this knowledge helps you make smarter positioning decisions, also allowing your healers to support you without exposing themselves. Even if flexing roles isn't your thing, mastering at least two roles can be a game changer in ranked play. For tip number two, knowing when to swap heroes to counter the enemy team is crucial. If you're up against a strong Groot who's consistently blocking areas with walls, making the switch to someone like Wolverine who can grab him and pull him away from his team, or even a Punisher or Squirrel Girl that can burn down his walls instantly can be a huge game changer. Now, if you're having to deal with someone like Black Panther or Magic diving your backline, having a combo of people like Namor and Luna with their buff can keep them in check and possibly get them to switch off their characters entirely. Understanding counters and being flexible with your character picks will give you and your team a significant advantage. Now for tip number three, as mentioned in my silver guide, don't just throw out your ultimate the second you get it. Use it strategically. At this rank, you should be trying to focus and coordinating ults with your teammate even if you were in a random lobby. For example, say you're playing Magneto, holding onto your ult to counter the enemy's ultimate can be an example of this. So if the enemy has, say, a Cloak and Dagger, Star-Lord, or Punisher, your ult can now negate most of the value they can get out of that ultimate. The key is to maximize impact, so even if you're not trying to counter an ult, even if you are just going to be able to take one or two enemies, that can still turn the tide of a fight if those 1 to 2 enemies are a good pick to take out at the time, say a healer. Additionally, you want to keep track of the enemy ultimate status as well. When you die, watch the kill cam and you can relay this ultimate charge info for that player to your team, or just be aware of where the rest of their team might be in their ultimate status as well. Awareness at this level will really help you climb faster. For tip number four, you should start listening to enemy voice lines and animations because they can warn you about incoming abilities or ultimates. For example, an easy one to watch out for is if the other team has a Doctor Strange, you can listen for his call out and while he attempts to create a portal. Hearing this can allow your team a vital few seconds to reposition defensively. Another example of this is Scarlet Witch's ultimate, which she shouts out, but it takes time to cast, and if your team reacts quickly enough after hearing her voice line, you can shut her down before she's even able to get her ultimate off. Now, if you're struggling to hear these types of things, a pro tip is to enable voiceover subtitles in the audio settings so you can see these cues without actually having to try to hear them. To change the setting, you simply go into Settings, then Audio. After that, simply scroll down to the button where you will see Voice over Subtitles. This is what you want to enable. Moving on to tip number 5, and that is start taking space. And what this means is when your team wins a fight, don't just sit back. Push forward and take the space. Ideally, you want to move up to a better advantage point so when the enemy team gets back from spawn, they're not going to have as easy of a time to recontest the point. Learning how far to take the push takes practice, unfortunately, but a good rule of thumb is to try to advance at least 2 to 3 card lengths ahead. And now, if your team is a really confident group and playing well together, you could push farther than this. For tip number 6, just as you push when you're winning, you need to back off when you're losing. If one teammate dies, it doesn't mean that you need to fall all the way back, but what you might want to do is start playing around cover and a bit more cautiously in the engagement. Now, if multiple teams go down, retreat and regrouping is the better approach instead of staggering into a lost fight. For tip number 7, and one of the biggest mistakes in gold rank, is staggering your deaths. If most of your team dies, don't trickle in one by one before re-engaging. As I stated in my silver guide, you will definitely have games, unfortunately, where your teammates aren't coordinating and ignoring this completely, but definitely do try to communicate with them if possible. For those of you that don't have a mic or time to type in chat, there's also another way to communicate with your team. You actually have a quick communication button, which by default is tied to clicking down your scroll wheel. And well, the great part about this wheel is that it can be easily adjusted by going into keyboard, then selecting communications, and you should see here that there's settings that you can change to rebind this whole communication wheel permanently. And I highly recommend changing one of your 4 settings to include the button group up. This gives you another way to try and coordinate with your team, and beyond that, there are multiple other great options here, like I said, to add to your wheel. On to tip number 8, and knowing who to target in the middle of a fight can be crucial. For this rank, you really should be starting to focus on being aware of low health enemies to help finish them off, or at least trying to make callouts to have your team help with this. Now, if you are currently engaged in a different part of a fight, try to be aware of looking around when you can and helping secure other kills. While you might take a bit of damage in your current fight, you could be useful in just splashing a little bit more damage onto an enemy that your teammates just can't seem to get and finish off. Now, if you have an ultimate to use, finding things like enemy backlines to target can prove useful, as taking out the enemy heals leaves them in a difficult spot to win a fight. For tip number 9, I want to talk about cart pushing. First, regarding the cart mechanics. If you're pushing as an attacker, the cart actually does provide you a small heal over time bonus while standing near it. That means fighting near it can be very beneficial. Secondly, as many of you know, that you don't have to be near the cart for it to move, but when someone on your team is close to the cart, it actually gains a speed bonus to its movement. Now, this cart at base movement moves at 1 meter per second. With one player standing next to it, it actually jumps up to 1.67 meters per second. With 2 people next to it, it gets bumped up to 1.93 meters per second. And lastly, with 3 players, it moves up to 2.26 meters per second. And now you can have more than 3 players on the cart, but the speed bonus caps out at 3 players. Up next for tip number 10, and this is knowing when to peel for your team. Peeling means protecting your teammates who are under pressure. So if your backline is being dived by a Black Panther, as a tank or a DPS, you should help fend off them so that your healers can stay focused on healing. Even certain support heroes like Invisible Woman can help by pushing enemies away, buying your team vital seconds to get to cover or additional heals before re-engaging. For tip number 11, I want to bring back up about watching how many deaths you have in the game. Dying too much often means that you're giving the enemy an advantage and leaving your team at a disadvantage. Now, we all have bad games here and there, but if you notice that you're solely having high deaths among multiple games, try to review your gameplay and figure out what is going wrong. Improving your survivability will naturally help you climb. And for my last tip, competitive play isn't always fair. Sometimes you'll get teammates who don't seem to know what they're doing, players who trash talk, or even trolls that intentionally throw the game. Don't let these games tilt you. Focus on what you can control. If you run into toxic players, use the block feature, report them when you can. But if you are on a losing streak, I typically try to take at least 20 or 30-minute break before queuing back up. Well, that wraps up my top tips for breaking out of gold and into platinum. Hopefully this gave you better ideas of what to focus on to help you continue to climb. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.